Good morning and welcome to Cheche, the show where opinion counts, live on Citizen TV. I'm your host, Udwaka Mimo. Now, the Constitution guarantees the right to adequate and acceptable food for every Kenyan. But we know that there are people who sleep hungry, who struggle to eat even one meal a day. An estimated 10 million Kenyans are food insecure and rely on the government and humanitarian agencies to feed them. Well, there's an attempt to correct that situation from the Senate. The Food Security Bill is now at the committee stage after its second reading yesterday. The Majority Whip of the Senate, nominated Senator Cheche, is the sponsor of the bill. She's our guest today. We also have with us Dr. John Mutunga, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the Kenya National Farmers Federation. Also with us, Waweru Mburu, who's sitting in for David Makali, and Mutegi Njau, as you know, is on leave. Good morning and welcome to the program. Ms. Elachi, let's address the problem first and how we got to this situation where Kenya finds itself unable to feed Kenyans.
Thank you, Udwak. I think I'll start now with the history, and I'll just go back to, let's say, 1965, when we first had the first session of paper by the late Tomboya. And you remember the three key fundamental issues he was raising of poverty, hunger, and health. And moving forward, I think the university, and especially the Nairobi University, has been looking at many various ways of unlocking the issue of, first of all, poverty, because poverty goes with hunger. And 2012 now, the 10th Parliament was able to give some resources under the leadership of Elias Mbao, at that time the Maragua Member of Parliament, to the university to do a research and ensure they come up with findings that will help now the country to understand where are we on the issue of food security. And after that, under the African Women Institute studies, which is at the Nairobi University, in the leadership of Wanjiku Cabrera, they were able to go around the country in 20 counties to look at how do we live. How do we wake up in the morning? Do we wake up with water? Do we wake up with a cup of porridge? Wake up with a cup of tea? And it's very interesting that you find that in some regions, they wake up with no water. In other regions, they wake up with a cup of porridge. A cup of porridge that will be taken in the morning, but you have to have your next meal when you're going to bed. Now, when you look at that, and I think from a woman's perspective, knowing very well women are the ones who will ensure the cup of porridge is there, will ensure instead of my kid waking up with nothing, I will go and look for roots or some dried fruits or some wild fruits and bring on the table for them to have. And that's where we are. That's why we thought, after the findings, we must unlock Section 43 or Article 43 of the Constitution 1C. It is unlocking Article 53C, the right to every child for nutrition food. And the good thing with the Constitution, it just does not talk about food, but acceptable food, adequate food, meaning it has to have nutrition. It's supposed to be a meal that will make you not to use medicine, but food can also prevent a lot.
But how are you defining food?
We define food as, now in legal, how they define food on legal basis is so different the way a layman will define food. A layman will define food as anything that he will find and eat. In a legal basis, when we're saying nutritional food, we are saying, are you able to have some protein, some vitamin, and in the end, some carbohydrate that will make you now say, I have taken food that will help you to build what is supposed to be built within your body. So, I think I'll be lying here to say, even me, I have never understood how do I define food, because when you go to a nutritionist, she also now defines it so differently. She starts putting in the calories. But what we are saying in the bill is we are looking to an ordinary Kenyan an ordinary Kenyan who sometimes will have maize, beans, potatoes, but how does he or she ensures she can have all that and it will still balance the way the doctor will, or a nutritionist will help you to balance the proteins and the starches.
Okay, Dr. Mutunga, let me come to you because you lobby on behalf of farmers.
Yes.
And your background, you spent some time with the Ministry of Agriculture. How would you define food?
Some complete food, if I may say, is that which offers the total dietary components or the total requirements of the body.
Okay, so the
we have the
nutrition and the
carbohydrates,
vitamins,
we have vitamins, we have minerals, all the requirements that the body requires, what the body requires. And it anchors very closely on food security definition. Because food security basically talks about a state when all people, not a few people or selected people, at all times have adequate physical, social, economic supply of quality, safe and nutritious food for their dietary requirements for a healthy life. That definition is so loaded. It talks about everything. Mm-hmm. So you have to have physical access or social access or economic access. Mm-hmm. Physical access basically means providing food itself in physical terms. A lot of sources of carbohydrates, sources of vitamins, sources of minerals, and so on. And then if it is not physical access, then you should have economic access, whereby you can buy food, or social access, whereby you can negotiate for food without necessarily compromising anything about human beings. So
okay. Yeah. Senator Elachi, if the Constitution guarantees the right to food, why do we need this food security bill to ensure that Kenyans are fed?
Because one, we don't have a framework at the moment.
Even though we have ministries like Agriculture and Devolution and Planning?
The framework they have is a framework where you have an authority, but it does not really address, first, when you have production, how do you ensure what he's saying, access? How do you ensure that a woman will know, today I'm in Kwale, I woke up in the morning, there's no food. Who do I go to? I know I'll rush to the county government. But at that time, the county government will tell you, for me to have relief food, now I have to call Nairobi. I have to ensure now I discuss with the Ministry of Devolution, for example, to see how now the truck will bring the food. Now who distributes when it arrives in Kwale? Now we have to think. It becomes a conflict again. It's the county commissioner, which is true, but then the governor and the people who elected the governor are looking and wondering, really? So I have to now, for food, I have to rush to the county government, county commissioner. So what we are trying to do is create this framework where all of them, so that you are a responsibility, you are accountable, and people know both the governor and the county commissioner must understand when we are about to just say there is no food. So let's not wait until the woman starts crying, Sirikali nisaidia, but wait, have someone who can map and say, before they start crying, we have raised our red flag. We are just about to see hunger within this. Or, where are our strategic grains? How do we ensure our production comes in and you save the food earlier, so that when you're raising that red flag, I'm not rushing to Nairobi first. I'm saying I have a strategic grain and I can use that before also I raise a flag to Nairobi. I think it's a framework that wants to unlock.
Two issues. When you talk about session of paper number 10,
yes.
The problem we had with the paper was it had social characteristics, while the government then was a capitalistic one. Now,
yes.
Are you saying that you who belong to the Jubilee side of government, you are going to change even the way you approach your politics? Because the way you are talking is like you want to introduce what we call social democracy, because you have to provide for the people. That's one. Number two, are you making people dependent, or are you going to still give people food Why would you take that food to the lady?
One at a time, because these are quite important points that you're raising. So let's start with the market and ideology.
I think when I look at the Jubilee Manifesto, we had started social democracy from the word go away. When you look at the pillars, I think there was Uwazi, Uwezo, and all the pillars go back to a social democratic system. Now, when you look at the monies that Jubilees have also, at one point we have Uwezo Fund, we have the Youth Fund, we have everything has a fund. That fund, we have the Peoples with Disability Fund, we have now the Elderly Fund. When you look at all that and put together, you're already talking of a socio-economic progress country. But all we need to ask ourselves as Jubilee and as a country, because when I do this, I'll be very honest to you, this is a private bill. It's a bill as a Kenyan, I felt, if indeed we used taxpayers' money to do a finding, why can't we end and have a good end result on it? So for me, I look at it at that level. But at the same time, it unlocks what also Jubilee wanted to have. When you look at our manifesto, all I'm doing is to unlock also the manifesto and make it now realize its life. Yes.
Dr. Mutimbo, you want to comment?
Yes, I think we cannot quite divorce from the social dimension of looking at things, because we have a constitution which provides for adequate supply of food to everyone, which is basically social. Then we have, Kenya is a signatory to the voluntary guidelines on the right to food as a basic human right, which is also purely social. On the other hand, we have the Vision 2030, which is a social pillar, which is a guiding principle now for development. Therefore, we have to be socially oriented as well.
Okay, so then we come to the question of dependency. Are we creating dependency in Kenya?
No, I don't think we are creating dependency, because first of all, we are saying in the bill that the government has to ensure, one, we have the small farmers who are already there, improve their inputs, reduce the number of taxes or amounts we put on the inputs that they use for agriculture, ensure that they are able themselves to buy that fertilizer, but at a price they can afford, and therefore in the end let them sell again the produce back to government, and government will put it in those strategic grains we are talking about. And therefore when I go there, already it's affordable to me, it's accessible to me, I'm able now to go and buy at a better price. Or don't forget, not all Kenyans have land. Therefore for me, I might have land, I might have my own grain at home, but there are those who do not have completely land, those in the formal sectors like Nairobi and the rest. How do we ensure they access adequate food, as we are talking about? How do you ensure through, I can see the young people
But
are
in this
now
instance,
saving.
you're thinking about food as a grain, as a cereal.
Not just a cereal. I'm just using it as an example. But food, first of all, the bill says we need to go back even to the traditional and non-traditional foods, because they're there. And we need to create that awareness. That's why also we have an article on public participation, so that they will come in and say, for example, in Western, we will say we have cassava, we have sorghum, we have millet, and we use that as our food. We have maize, yes, but of late we can see how it's working. It's not working so well for us. So yeah, and we move. And in some areas they have rice, they have ndengu, they have, so all that is food. Not just the maize thing that we have been seeing as the only food that we know.
I like what Mutunga has talked about when he was giving the definition of food. But we also need to think probably in this bill, I don't know whether you're thinking about preferences and varieties, so that I don't just eat what is available, but I have also choices of what I want to take.
Oh yeah, yes.
Yeah. I think the bill actualizes a precautionary principle, in the sense that it brings different institutions and government, different levels of government, to their consciousness in terms of handling the food issue. In terms of weighing out what are the deficits, where do we produce what food, actualizing the physical access to food, and also being able to quickly move and to provide food, even if it means buying food.
Yeah.
So that is what it's actually doing.
But this is not new. You've taken us back to 1965 in the sessional paper. But the Agriculture Ministry, and you might know because you did spend some time there, had something called a National Food and Nutrition Security Policy. So why, does this supersede that? I mean, we seem to have all these, great pieces of paper and legislation, but we don't actually implement them.
I can explain that. In the legislative framework, we start with a policy, which is therefore interpreted in terms of enforcement. We do a bill, which goes on to become an act. An act of parliament actualizes the implementation of the policy. So the policy has given the broad and specific guidelines on how to provide for adequate and nutritious food. Then we needed a framework that is going to ensure that this is enforced, and the specific responsibilities bestowed on specific individuals, so that people take responsibility.
Okay, so now let's come to the key proposals, because Senator Elachi, you mentioned a couple of things. You talked about county level. What happens if you're in Kwale and you've got to go to the county commissioner, and then the governor and the governor's supporters feel disenfranchised? And the bill, I believe, addresses, or at least proposes, two separate administrative strands: a national food security authority, and at the county level, your food security committees.
Yes.
How would those work?
At the national level, when you have the authority, we've ensured that the Council of Governors will also give in their representatives to sit on the national, so that you don't have a conflict of them feeling you've done an authority, it's at the national level, and now you've thought of a committee, so where do we sit in? When you come at the county level, now we have the committees. These are committees. Their key functions will be: one, to be like a whistleblower; two, to ensure we have now county policies. The same policies they have, let it now be disseminated. Let at the county levels also the county assembly understand the food security policy, but do not duplicate. Look at what is there. And every county is so unique. You will find, and that's why it's very important to have those committees, because what happens in Turkana will not happen in Trans Nzoia. Trans Nzoia has food, and therefore their committee will be very different. Their committee maybe will be more focused on, let us not see food getting rotten, let us have a way of redistributing the food, let it get out of Trans Nzoia and give it to other counties. You'll find another county having a lot of fruits, another county like Nyandaro having a lot of milk. How do they work with Nakuru? All that. So the committees now will come in. It can also be a very good structure of giving out even the indicators of food now. We shall understand, as Waweru said, that how will I eat, why should I eat food that I don't want, that is in the grain, but I want to eat some. You will know from which county, even when you are a trader, when you are doing trading in terms of your marketing, you know, in this county, if I go, this is what we get there. So I think at one time, and I'm hoping years to come, we'll find that now every county can stand and say, this is our unique food stable. If it is potatoes in Nyandaro, they can tell us, this is our economic food. This is what brings in our money, our revenues. So it helps. And then two, that same structure at the county now. When you look at the bill, it talks about women who are pregnant, lactating women. You find children, feeding programs. So when you go to schools, how do you also map and understand every school, if you have started a program of feeding, is able also first to feed their children, the kids in those schools, but also to access that food. How do they get that? How does the governor know there's a school somewhere that has not received food at all? Three, it now becomes like a watchdog from the national, because of late what we have seen, and I'll give an example of, for example, Lamu. Lamu, as the cohesion committee from Parliament, we went for just a case study fact-finding after what happened. We were told there was no camp. And that was now from the administrative part. They said there's no camp, there's no IDPs and that. But then the good thing, the county assembly said, no, we will take you to a camp that has 700 households. they have not received food from this. When we called Nairobi, the PS says, no, I have a checklist. I have sent food. Food this, food this, food. So we were shocked, and we asked them, if you have received all this, how come the 700 households do not have food? And therefore we are saying those committees now become more alert, that when food is coming, you must know what has entered, what is going out, which families are you helping, because not all families will come also for the same. Some families
There's an interesting text message that picks up on that point. Senator Lachi, food goes together with shelter. What are you doing regarding shelter? I reported a case to you in Uasin Gishu where squatters were forcefully evicted, their crops destroyed. Doesn't that lead to food insecurity? That comes from Daniel.
Yes, and I know there are two issues. The same article we are trying to unlock has food and shelter. Now, I know we have to come up and be very realistic on the issue of shelter, but also it's something, again, that will take a while, just the way this has taken a while. I know I gave the report to the authorities about what Daniel is saying. I'm just hoping maybe if it has not worked, and that's why I'm saying if you don't have a structure that is functional, then because I know that was way back, I can't remember, early in January is when I met the team, way back. So if we are in June and talking of the same problem, that's very sad. But I told the authority, I'll follow up.
Interestingly enough, talking about time, you started the process of this bill last year.
Yes.
Because it's actually titled the Food Security Bill 2014.
Yes.
A year and a half later, why is it still winding its way through the legislative process if it's so critical for this nation?
Well, some of the private bills sometimes are very critical bills, and sometimes you'll always have to want to work closely with government so that you don't find yourself having conflict and the government feeling at one point, why is it that you're doing this, and yet we have a government bill. And I know it's a question, the food. In fact, at one point, I had really requested the bill to go directly to the devolved committee, but I knew it's a sessional committee and therefore you can't deal with bills there. So it had to go to the agricultural. And I kept on reminding the agricultural committee that just remember, food cuts across. You have to deal with it in the Ministry of Trade, you have to deal with it in the Ministry of Agriculture, and therefore do not tie the bill back to the Ministry of Agriculture. Because we are talking about unlocking it and unlocking food, which in the end, always when you look at the end results, when there's any challenge in the country, we have to go to the Ministry of Devolution. And I kept on reminding them that bill has to go under the Ministry of Devolution. Why? Because one, when we are looking for food, that's where you have to go. Two, it has to be very close to also the presidency, because you find that now the Interior Ministry, when they have also a challenge, I mean, when they want to distribute food, they use the county commissioners who are under the ministry. So I was really trying to make it work, and that's why it's under the Ministry of Devolution, not in a bad way.
Senator Lache, I like the bill. I like your zeal and what you're doing. But the other question is, how are you going to distribute that which is not there? Before we go to distribution, do we have enough food in this country? If we are importing onion from Tanzania, oranges from South Africa, I don't know, you are not going to distribute that which is not there. And I like when you bring in the issue of the Ministry of Trade, that this cannot just be dealt with by the Ministry of Agriculture alone. Because we have to bring in several ministries. Because before we have this food distributed there, we need to have food first there. The government of Kenya does not have land where it grows food. It is the people of Kenya who grow the food. So the food that you have at Sirius Board, it is from Kenyans. So before it is redistributed, can we first make sure that people have food on the ground?
Okay, I can see Wawel wants to rattle me a bit and make me wake up. Yes, I know that, and no, I want to be. This is not government. This is Beatrice Elachi now speaking. One, I have a big problem with the way sometimes government does things. I know we have food. We have just refused to be honest enough to go out there, look at what we have. Is it enough for our people, and what you can bring in as surplus? Now, because we want to do business, and we have made it a culture in Kenya, today we are calling it tender entrepreneur. That
Entrepreneurs.
Yeah, that if it is maize, you will find maize in our grain somewhere, or our silos, or where they put the cereal board puts their maize. And you'll find still we are buying maize coming from Tanzania, Malawi. But I'll also say that that's why the Ministry of Trade comes in, because right now, after 10 years with COMESA, you can see we've now opened up. We cannot fight it anymore. You have to agree some of the things to come in. What we need to ask ourselves is, while we are bringing in maize from other countries and the rest, how do we place in the price of the farmer? And if the price will go down, then you must also, as government, ensure the inputs that you are giving your farmers must also go down, so that they will still feel, I'm making profit with the little that I'm getting. If I'm selling a bag of maize at 1,000 bob, then I don't need to buy fertilizer very expensive, that I'll always find myself going into a loss instead of profit. So it's government to come in, and that's why, and I'm sorry to turn it a bit and say, when I look at Mumias, I get very worried. I get very worried as British Elach. I know the president has very good will, but at the same time, we must remember COMESA is now open, and the sugar will have to come from other countries, and we can't say no. How do we sustain the Mumias at that level as we move in?
Dr. Mutunga, you have any...
Yes, the question of food is actually a major one in this country. We have taken a long time without addressing it squarely and confronting it strategically. The reason I'm saying this is because we could have sorted out our food issues if we moved on at the tempo we were in 1961. We were able to fully feed ourselves. We did not have any issues by the time of transiting to our own governance as a republic and as a sovereign state. Many things have happened in between here, and they have led to scarcity of food. We are net importer of all food apart from milk. We are only surplus producer of milk. All the other food, we are net importer. For instance, the main staple food that we consider to be most important in the country, maize, we do between 32 and 34 million 90 kilograms bags per year, on a very good year. Sometimes we do 28. And the consumption rate, the per capita consumption, is about a bag per person per year. So if we have 42 million, then you produce 32 million. It means you have a deficit of 10 million 90 kilogram bags to import. When it comes to importation, we make certain mistakes. Instead of importing exactly what we need, and this is something that we are looking into, whether it is properly provided for in this bill, we import more. Then at the point of harvesting, our farmers cannot sell, and therefore they are frustrated, they cannot produce more. The following year, it's a vicious cycle. We have not substituted our staples. We are mainly on maize. Where maize came from, I do not know. We were very okay with our sorghum, millet, and so on. And right now, everybody wants to eat healthy. It's going back there, which means we abandoned our staple food and promoted others. So we haven't done a lot of research in those areas. It's now we are turning back to them as important crops. We have been categorizing them as orphan crops. On the other hand, if you look at the way we are supporting the agricultural sector as a sector that feeds the nation, I think as a nation we are not very serious. If we look at the last budget, the budgetary allocation.
Actually, we'll come into that.
We'll come into that.
We'll interrogate that.
Okay, let me talk about trend and the investments that are coming up, which can actually support.
Because I can, we need to take a break now.
Yeah.
This is Cheche. We're live on Citizen TV. Today's show is grappling with the question of how best to ensure adequate access and acceptable food for every Kenyan. What do you think? Is the proposed food security bill the best way to go about that? Our SMS number is 22422, and you can tweet us using the hashtag Cheche.